Good evening, folks. Reloading Bench back with you again. I started last week with some extra time on my hands, so I decided to do a video on tools I use. And I got to thinking, over the videos I've put up over the last year, a number of them have tools covering different aspects of reloading or the 416 build, stuff in between. And I thought, why not focus on some tools? And there's enough of them out there, and everybody's got their own preferences. So I wanted to pick up a swager that was on sale. It was a pretty decent price for this RCBS unit. I've seen videos on it before, and I wasn't really doing this video for how a swager works as much as I was for how I've decided to integrate it onto my bench. And for those of you that have seen some of my previous videos, I usually do on-press swaging, whether that's with the RCBS pocket swager adapted for the Lee press, the Lee Classic turret, or something from CH4D. The idea behind looking at this particular swager option was if I do my on-press swaging, sometimes when I'm reloading or doing anything with 223, I might come across one that just is a little too tight, and instead of fighting with the primer, it would make sense to just swage it right there. Well, getting the swager out, setting it up on the bench for just a one-off or a couple, maybe not worth the effort. Plus, this gives me an excuse to try something a little bit different that's been around for quite a long time. So those of you who know what this is, it's pretty straightforward. I was looking at there's a handful of swagers. I wanted something small, didn't take up a lot of bench space. And if you've seen, again, some of my other videos, what I've done with my T-Track, I wanted it to be relatively portable, but by the same token, I wanted it to be pretty secure to the bench. So, if you try to hold on to this thing by hand, you're going to be moving all over the place. It's just not something that you're going to have an easy time with. So what I decided to do, as I've done with other tools, is I built or crafted, I don't know if built's the right word, I did some woodworking and came up with a little mount that would allow me to take my T-Track mounts and mount this swager. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and show off my handiwork because I'm proud of it. I used all of the components that actually came with the RCBS swager. The two hex bolts in here are actually meant for, I believe, the RCBS mount, press mount slash, it's like an aluminum mounting device. I don't have that, obviously, because I don't have a lot of RCBS equipment, no presses, and just decided to do a little handiwork with some stuff I had in the garage and mount it so that, or build this so that I would be able to then mount it to my T-Track. So I'll cut this here. I'll mount this probably to my upper track here so that it's in frame, and then talk about the tool a little bit, what I like, maybe what I don't like, and how it's working out for me and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So back in a minute when I set it up. Back again. So I thought before I finalize setting it up, I would show you what I do. Not that it's a big deal. Takes a whole 2 seconds to pull off the track protector and set the bolts in. I'll spend more time lining this particular, whoops. I'll spend more time lining this up and taking the washers off. Left-handed is challenging. Watch me cheat and bring the right hand in. Okay, so it's on there. It's not going anywhere. So This would make the movement of the tool, or at least the functions in order to do the tool, quite stable. I don't care how bad I would have to apply pressure to a particular crimp, but you'll see other videos, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the tool. I will highlight some of the things that I did or I adjusted to my liking. The one thing that I don't like about this tool, and it's not a big deal, but this particular pin, I understand the flexibility in terms of swapping parts out, but when pulling this off the bench and going to store it, this pin, I've misplaced it a couple times already. So it is what it is. Trade-off that I'm willing to deal with. But in terms of how I have set this particular nut for how easy it is to work the actual swager, I've seen it a lot tighter in other videos. I prefer to have it comfortably loose. Same thing with the actual swaging rod. There is, obviously, once you align this, I think it's roughly 1/8 of an inch between the end of the rod and the end of the actual swaging pin. There is a little bit of some leeway here to adjust, well, two adjustments. This particular nut on the other side that you can't see now, which is identical to this, is what controls how tight this moves. I wanted something that was relatively easy. As it comes from the factory, you're really having to put a little force on there, and there are divots in this particular side of the pin that allow it to catch at certain angles. So 90 degrees, it looks like maybe 45, and then 90 degrees down. There's an adjustment hex screw here that allows you to fine-tune a little bit of this movement. And I found what works best for me is to leave this slightly up. So if you look at where the swaging head is and where the pin is, they're obviously not in line, but I found that because of how I do this device, I tend to put a little bit of pressure on this tool here, or on this lever, so the tool does align a little better. So, and you'll see when I give a couple of examples on how well that actually does align up. Not perfect. There's obviously some manual stuff that's going on there. So when I have brass, or when I collect brass from the range, sometimes it's mine, sometimes it's somebody else's that either they don't want, or that happens to land in my lane. And I've done very different steps for brass prep, so this will take me down yet another path of interesting processes. But ultimately, once I've decapped and resized, or just decap, depending on which swager I'm going after, and one of the reasons I bought this is so that I could decap and resize all in one step, as opposed to what I've done in the past for the pocket swager on the press is decap and then swage, because I need that opening as large as possible for the pocket swager. The rod is just much bigger than this rod. So this will allow me to use brass that's been resized and decapped, as opposed to just decapped with the larger mouth opening on the case before it's been resized. So I would take my no-go, no-go tool. Obviously red side is the no-go, so the non-labeled side is the go, and I'm looking for something along those lines. This is actually what I would call, I wouldn't say a little loose, but no issues there whatsoever. I've got a couple of sample pieces of brass that should give me some challenge. Each one of these doesn't go in. I can force this in, but I don't want to do that. And all three of these are about the same. I could probably put a primer in there, a little bit of force, but I don't want to overdo it. So, and for demonstration purposes, we'll see how well I do with this tool set. So I've adjusted, and by popping it in, and I'm debating on, do I want to pop it down with my hand, hold it like this, and then swage, pop it up, take it out, or do I want to do something a little more, a little slower and more methodical, with the, and this is the example of wiggling the lever, pulling it out. I'm kind of thinking that when I get my groove, I would just be doing something like this and pulling it off. So let's see how well I did. So again, this is the go side, and I'm looking for snug, but not as snug as what it was. So we still got some snugness there. A little bit better. And like I said, now it's a little tighter to get out. So I'm going to say that maybe some adjustment is necessary right here in terms of how much this particular pin sticks out. So go for round 2. Still a little tight. And there goes my no-go tool, my go, no-go tool. Anything that hits the floor goes nuclear. So let's stop for a second and search the nuclear waste ground for fallen devices. And that gave me enough time to get a little more medicine. So, and you obviously have no idea, well, if I switch the brass, which I didn't, because it's still a little bit tight as far as I'm concerned. And that's still tight. I'm doing probably 1/16 turns on the lever, or rather the decap, the swaging rod, and that's still kind of tight. Still tight. And that's a little better. So we're getting there. And it's tight enough that I'm twisting out, which again I would prefer over something, again, my relatively easy fit. Getting a little better. I'm going in really small increments here. Better to give it not enough than too much. And that's probably going to be good enough, because that does look like a pretty small gap. Okay, so I'm going to say that's a success. That one felt tight. I'm going to say that's successful enough. And I'll probably take a caliper out after the video just to measure the difference between my sample piece in terms of depth of pocket and I'm going to say we're good. At least better than where we were, and that's a tough one to get out. So again, I'd rather have it a little tighter than not, but it's definitely getting in there with the go, no-go tool. So I'm going to say that this is a success, and we're good to go for this. And I'm going to put all this stuff away and think about what the next video is going to be. Take care, all.